I'm apparently a shitty aunt. Yeah, that's how I feel right now, but let me take you back a bit and explain how I got here. I'm a 35-year-old woman, single, and for the first time in a long time, I'm focusing on myself, my career, my health, and most importantly, my mental well-being. I used to be this constant people pleaser, always bending over backward to make sure everyone around me was happy, even if it meant sacrificing my own time, my energy, or my peace of mind. But after my last relationship, let's just say it ended in the kind of way that makes you reevaluate everything. I decided I needed to change. I started learning to say no and to prioritize my own happiness, which has been both liberating and terrifying. I have 3 sisters, and up until about 2014, we were really close. We've got matching tattoos, and we were the kind of sisters that texted constantly, made plans all the time, and were involved in each other's lives. Every milestone, every struggle, every celebration. It was us against the world, you know. Then life happened. My sister Jay got married, and I was so happy for her. But after she had her kids, things started to shift. It wasn't instant. It was slow, almost unnoticeable at first. But eventually, our relationship turned into me walking on eggshells, trying not to upset her over small things that never used to matter. She hasn't called me in over 7 years, and it's been 2 years since she's even stepped foot in my house. But guess who's been the one making the effort? Yeah, me. I'm the one driving an hour to her place to see the kids, to go to birthday parties, to show up for sports events, to be there for her even though she's barely acknowledged my existence for years. I'm the one contributing to the family chicken fry nights, showing up for their plans, and making sure I'm involved in her life and her kids' lives. But it's never enough. It's never reciprocated. I decided, though, after my last breakup, that I was done putting myself last. If I wanted to, I'd show up. If not, I wouldn't. That's been my new mantra, but apparently that makes me a shitty aunt in her eyes. Here's the thing. I've said no a few times. I'll admit that. I haven't gone to every damn softball game. I didn't feel like playing tag in 100-degree heat with a bunch of kids when I could be relaxing on my own couch. And yet, I didn't swing by her house every time I was in town because, to be honest, it feels more like a chore these days than a sisterly hangout. But I still showed up more than most would. I went to 2 of my niece's birthday parties that same week, back to back, but I didn't make it to the 3rd pool party. I was tired, and frankly, I didn't feel like driving another hour each way for the 3rd time in 7 days. Jay was furious. She let me know that my niece had been asking where I was, and how dare I disappoint her like that. Apparently, in my family, if you're single and don't have kids, there's this unspoken rule that you're automatically available for everything. I don't know what my sisters think I do all day. Stare at a blank wall. The fact that I have a full-time job, a home to take care of, and a life of my own seems to be lost on them. And it's not just the Miss Pool party. Over the past year, things have gotten worse. My sister's attitude toward me went from passive-aggressive to just straight-up rude. Every time I showed up, it was like she was annoyed by my presence, like I was somehow in the way. I'm not stupid. I could feel the tension, the resentment. So I asked around, and eventually, I found out from other family members that she was pissed off because, in her words, I wasn't making enough of an effort. She thought I didn't care about her or the kids anymore. And apparently I'm lacking some serious aunt skills. That stung. I love my nieces and nephews. I care about them deeply. And if Jay really felt like I wasn't pulling my weight, I figured I'd do something about it. So for the past year, I've tried to step up. I've FaceTimed them more, sent gifts, made more of an effort to go to games and events, invited them over to my house for pool days or fishing trips. I've gone out of my way to show I care. But here's the thing. Every single one of my invitations has been turned down. 9 times I've reached out, suggesting things we could do together. And 9 times she said no. To make things worse, she stopped sending me the kids' sports schedules. So now I don't even know when or where their games are. I've asked, I've reminded her, but her response is always, well, you rarely attend anyway. How am I supposed to attend if I don't even know when the damn games are? It feels like she's setting me up to fail, like no matter what I do, I'm the bad guy in the scenario. It's exhausting. I'm mentally and emotionally drained from trying to fix something that feels so one-sided. I even started seeing a therapist a few months ago to help me navigate all this family drama because it was eating me up inside. I didn't want to lose my sister, and I didn't want to be the kind of aunt who wasn't involved in her nieces' and nephews' lives. But nothing I did seemed to make a difference. Finally, a few months ago, I got up the nerve to confront Jay about everything. I wanted to clear the air, to figure out what was really going on and see if we could salvage our relationship. I suggested we sit down and talk, and after a lot of back and forth, she finally agreed. But it didn't go the way I'd hoped. We met up, and for 50 minutes, she listed off all the ways I'd failed her, all the times I hadn't been there, all the reasons she was mad at me. And as I sat there, trying to stay calm, trying to explain my side of things, it became clear that none of it mattered to her. In her mind, this was all my fault. It didn't matter that she'd never called me in years, that she'd ignored every invitation I extended, that she'd shut me out in so many ways. To her, I was the problem. I was the selfish one. The conversation ended with her telling me that while she'd remain civil for the sake of the family, she had no interest in repairing our relationship. She wasn't willing to work on things, and she didn't care if we drifted apart. I was devastated. I mean, this was my sister, someone I used to be so close with, someone I'd shared everything with. And now she was telling me that she didn't want to be a part of my life anymore. I felt stuck. I still do. And to make matters worse, my other two sisters seem to be siding with Jay. They're not as vocal about it, but it's clear that they think I'm the one at fault here. They've been distant too, and it's like I'm losing all of them at once. So now I'm left wondering, am I the problem? Am I really the shitty aunt and sister who doesn't realize how selfish she's been? Or is this just a case of unrealistic expectations being placed on me because I'm the single one with no kids? I honestly don't know anymore. I still care about my nieces and nephews. I still want to be a part of their lives. But how do I do that when their mom, my sister, is actively shutting me out? Every time I think about trying to fix things, my anxiety spikes. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around my own family, constantly afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. And with the holidays coming up, I can already feel the tension building. How am I supposed to face all of them when I know they think I'm the problem? I guess I just have to focus on me. That's what my therapist keeps telling me. To stop trying to control things I can't control, like my sister's feelings or actions. But it's easier said than done when you care about someone and you want to make things right. The real kicker is it wasn't always this way. I remember when I was still that aunt, the one who was close with the kids. I was there when my niece took her first steps, when she lost her first tooth. Back then, Jay would call me about the smallest things, just to chat, to laugh about something silly that happened, or to ask for advice about raising the kids. It's hard not to look back on those moments and wonder where exactly things went wrong. What was the turning point? What changed in her that made me go from being her sister, her friend, her support, to being someone she seems to resent? I don't know. Maybe it started when I didn't prioritize her as much as I used to. Maybe it was when I decided to focus on my career, and I wasn't as available as I once was. Or maybe, in her eyes, I was just the single sister who could never understand her struggles as a mom and wife, even though I tried. Hell, I always tried. But somewhere along the way, my efforts became invisible to her. No matter what I did, it wasn't enough. I've spent countless nights over the past year replaying our conversations, thinking about how I could have handled things differently. Should I have been more available? Should I have gone to every damn event, no matter how tired or busy I was? Should I have forced myself to be more enthusiastic about spending time with her kids, even when it felt like she was shutting me out? But then I remind myself that relationships go both ways. It shouldn't have all been on me. Jake could have made an effort, too. She could have come to my house, accepted my invitations, met me halfway. She didn't, though. And now I'm left picking up the pieces, trying to figure out how to move forward. I guess the hardest part is accepting that this might just be how things are now. My therapist says it's okay to grieve relationships, even if they're not romantic ones. Losing a sibling, emotionally at least, can hurt just as much as any breakup. And that's what this feels like. A breakup with my sister. As for the kids, I don't know. I love them, and I'll always be there for them if they ever need me. but I'm done bending over backward for someone who doesn't seem to want me around. I can't keep exhausting myself emotionally for a relationship that's one-sided. It's painful, but I have to protect my peace, my mental health. I can't be the only one fighting for this anymore. So yeah, I'm apparently a shitty aunt in her eyes. And maybe to some extent, I've internalized that. But I'm also a woman who's learning to set boundaries, to prioritize herself, and to let go of relationships that no longer serve her, even if that means letting go of family. If you've been through something similar, I'd love to hear how you coped, because right now I feel lost. And with the holidays coming up, I don't know if I can face another family gathering, knowing I'm the outsider in my own family.
About 2 months ago, I, 28 female, had to move back in with my mom in her small NYC apartment. I used to live on my own, but with rent prices skyrocketing in the city, I had no choice but to temporarily move in with her. Honestly, it wasn't the worst-case scenario. My mom and I have always gotten along pretty well, and we've found ways to respect each other's space, even though it's tight. Plus, I keep telling myself it's just temporary until I land a better-paying job and can afford to live on my own again. It was all working out for about a month, and then my sister showed up. She texted my mom out of the blue late on a Friday night, saying she needed a place to stay because of an emergency at her apartment. No warning, no heads up, just, I'm on my way. I didn't even have time to process it before she was at the door with her bags. When I tell you I was not happy, I mean I was fuming. Here's the thing about my sister. She's a handful, to put it lightly. If I'm being real, she's an absolute nightmare. You might think I'm exaggerating, but let me give you some background. Back in late 2020 and into 2021 during the lockdown, we were all stuck in this same apartment. My mom, my dad, my sister, and me. It was hell. We're talking 4 adults crammed into a one-bedroom apartment during one of the most stressful times in history. I was unemployed. My sister had dropped out of college and tensions were high. But what made it unbearable wasn't the cramped space or the fact that we were all getting cabin fever. It was her. She has this way of just getting under your skin. I mean, it's like she thrives on creating chaos. There was always an attitude, always a snide remark, and always some unnecessary drama. One time, she called the cops on both my parents because she was pissed off. Not because they did anything criminal or abusive, but just because she didn't like something they said to her. I mean, who does that? My parents aren't perfect, but she took things to another level of ridiculous. And that's not even the half of it. She'd be out with her friends, coming and going as she pleased, and when she was home, she refused to speak to anyone. She shut herself off from us completely, but that didn't stop her from causing tension. So, yeah, you can imagine how thrilled I was to hear she was coming to crash with us again. Fast forward to her first night back, and I already felt my anxiety creeping up. She didn't even try to ease her way into the situation. She just barged in like she owned the place, making herself right at home on the couch like nothing had happened. And sure enough, it didn't take long for the old habits to resurface. The first issue came when she started picking fights over the air conditioning. Of all things. I like it cool, so I'd been setting it around 68 to 69 degrees Fahrenheit. It's NYC summer, the humidity is killer, and the AC is a non-negotiable for me. But the second night she was there, she made this whole scene about how it was too cold and how I was being inconsiderate. What killed me was how she addressed it. It wasn't a normal, "Hey, can you maybe adjust the temperature a bit?" Oh no. She stood there with her hand on her hip, her voice all stern and condescending, like she was some disappointed schoolteacher. "You need to stop turning the AC so low," she said, practically scolding me like I was a child. I bit my tongue, but I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I tried to keep it civil at first, told her we could compromise on a temperature, but she wasn't having it. It turned into a full-blown argument within minutes. both of us yelling at each other in the middle of the living room. My mom tried to play referee, but my sister wasn't interested in finding a middle ground. She just wanted to be right, and that's always been her problem. But the real breaking point came a few days later. It was a regular weekday evening. I'd just come home from a long day at work, mentally drained, and ready to just collapse on the couch. I walked in and found my sister sitting there on her phone, scrolling through Instagram or whatever, like she didn't have a care in the world. Fine, whatever. I wasn't in the mood to talk anyway. I just wanted to tidy up a bit, get the living room clean, maybe spray some Lysol to freshen the place up because we'd had guests the night before. As I'm spraying down the sofa, she suddenly turns to me, not even looking up from her phone, and says, "You're doing too much." I froze for a second. The Lysol can still in my hand. Did she seriously just say that? I took a breath, trying to let it go. But no, she just kept going. "You're always so extra with your cleaning," she said, her tone dripping with judgment. At that point, I was done. I snapped. "Don't talk to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She, of course, shot back with, "I can do whatever I want." I turned to her, and the words just flew out of my mouth. "Leave me the F asterisk 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 alone." That's when she stood up and got in my face. Now, I'm not a confrontational person by nature, but I was so fed up with her crap that I wasn't backing down. Things escalated fast. And before I knew it, we were in a full-on physical altercation. My mom, who had been asleep, came rushing out of her room, completely disoriented and panicked, trying to break us up. It was a mess. We were yelling at each other for a good hour after that, airing out all the resentment that had been building up for weeks, maybe even years. Eventually, we both half-heartedly apologized, me for telling her to shut up, her for, I don't even remember what. She said something about how we needed to squash it, but I knew nothing was really resolved. The next morning, she was slamming doors, making it loud and clear that she wasn't over it. My mom tried to step in and tell her to knock it off, but that just sparked yet another hour-long argument, this time between my mom and my sister. I didn't even get involved. I just sat there, watching the chaos unfold, feeling completely drained. It was exhausting. All of it. Every single day. It felt like I was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next argument, the next snide comment, the next dramatic scene. And it wasn't just me. My mom felt the same way. We both tiptoed around my sister, trying not to set her off, but it didn't matter. She'd find something to get upset about, no matter how trivial. What made it worse was that my mom started digging into the whole "what's wrong with her" question, talking to people who knew my sister. Turns out, even her former best friend had distanced herself because of how harsh and cold my sister could be. When my mom asked her what happened, her ex-friend said, "She just has no empathy. She didn't care about anything I was going through." And that's the thing with my sister. It's like she lacks any kind of real emotional connection. She doesn't care about how her words or actions affect others. She's defensive, condescending, and quick to lash out if you even hint at the fact that she might be in the wrong. I don't know if it's narcissism or something else, but it's exhausting. It's like being around her sucks the life out of you. At this point, it's been almost 4 weeks since she moved back in, and I feel trapped in my own home. There's this constant dark cloud hanging over everything, and I can't help but count down the days until she finally leaves. I know my mom is just as desperate for peace, but she doesn't have the heart to kick her out. I can't stand living like this. I feel like I'm constantly on guard, constantly waiting for the next blow-up. And when she's not home, it's like I can finally breathe again. But the moment I hear the front door open, my whole body tenses up. I've tried to talk to her. I've tried to reason with her, but it's like talking to a brick wall. She doesn't care. She doesn't listen. She doesn't see the damage she's causing. And even if she did, I don't think she'd care. So now, I'm just trying to survive. I'm praying she finds a new place soon, praying that this nightmare will end sooner rather than later. Until then, I guess I'll keep my head down, avoid unnecessary interactions, and hope I can keep my sanity intact, because right now, it's hanging by a thread.
I'm 29, female, and I have 3 sisters. That's the basic setup, but trust me, the dynamics between us are anything but basic. Today, I got into an argument with one of them, and now I'm sitting here wondering if I'm actually the toxic one. I mean, I can be stubborn, I know that. But is it possible that I'm the problem in all of this? So let me back up. We have this unspoken rule in my family. We pool money together for birthday gifts. It sounds simple enough, right? In theory, it's a good system. We all chip in, get something nice for our siblings or parents, and it feels like a shared effort. Except it's almost always me who buys the actual gift. I'm the one running around, ordering stuff, picking things up, and spending my money up front. The expectation is that the others pay me back, but lately that's where the problem starts. You'd think it wouldn't be a big deal. I mean, they all have full-time jobs. They can afford it. But the fact is, I've been fronting the money for the last 2 birthdays, our sister Rachel's and Dad's, and still haven't seen a penny from them. That's a total of £80 each that they owe me. And don't even get me started on the £200 one of them still owes me from last year. It's been months. Do they think I'm made of money? This morning, I woke up annoyed, and instead of being an adult about it, I sent a bit of an arsey message. You know, one of those passive-aggressive texts you immediately regret, but don't have the guts to unsend. It was something along the lines of, "Hey, it'd be nice if I didn't have to keep chasing you both for the money." Short, sharp, and not really that nice. Of course, it spiraled from there. My younger sister, Sophie, was the first to reply, and she came in hot. "You don't have to be rude about it. I'll always pay you back." Which in my head was laughable because, no, she doesn't. I literally had a reminder in my phone to ask her about the money again this week. And I told her that, very directly. "Really? Because you still owe me £80. I shot back. "I'm getting paid tomorrow. You'll get your money then," she said, but there was that edge in her voice, you know? The one that tells you this conversation is not over. She wasn't going to let me win this one. Right, like the last 2 months? I couldn't help myself. I was on edge, tired of having the same argument over and over again, and honestly, I didn't want to back down. Then came the classic sibling escalation. We both started dragging out the receipts from past arguments. She said I was impossible to talk to, that I always acted like the martyr whenever it came to family stuff, that one hit a nerve, and I could feel my blood pressure rising. So I shot back, "Well, maybe I wouldn't feel like a martyr if you all actually stepped up and helped organize stuff instead of leaving it all to me." She went quiet for a second, and I thought maybe I'd finally gotten through to her. But no, Sophie's never one to stay silent for long. "You don't let anyone help. You always have to be in control," she said, her voice thick with accusation. I had to laugh. When have I ever stopped you from helping? I've asked you guys so many times, and you just ignore me. Now you want to turn it around and act like it's my fault. My heart was pounding at this point. I felt like I was being gaslit, like I was losing my mind. I've been the one organizing birthday gifts and family dinners for years. It's just what I do. It's never been a big deal until suddenly it was. What pissed me off the most was how calm she sounded compared to me. She was sitting on the other end of the line, probably rolling her eyes at everything I said while I was over here about to explode. The thing about Sophie is she's always had this way of making me feel like I'm the irrational one, the crazy one, whenever we argue. It's been like that since we were kids. But this argument wasn't just about the money anymore. It became about everything else, about the way we communicate or don't, the years of small slights and bottled up resentment. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking at this massive divide between us that had somehow formed over the years. And I couldn't figure out how we'd gotten there. Then, out of nowhere, she hits me with, "You don't pay me back either." I literally laughed out loud. "What? When have I ever not paid you back?" Sophie sighed, the kind of exasperated sigh that made me feel like she was talking to a child. "You owe me from last Christmas. For the drinks at the pub. You never gave me your share." I was stunned. "Are you serious? I paid you back the next day." "No, you didn't. I ended up covering it." I was shaking my head so hard I thought my neck might snap. Check your bank account, Sophie. I paid you back. You just don't remember. This back and forth went on for a while, and by the end of it, we were no closer to resolving anything. If anything, we were just more entrenched in our corners, both of us convinced the other was in the wrong. And that's when she said it, the thing that's been replaying in my head all day. You know, it's not just me who thinks this. None of us like talking to you. You're impossible. You always make everything about you. I stopped dead. My chest felt tight, like someone had punched me right in the ribs. I wanted to shout, to scream at her, to tell her how unfair that was. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, staring at the text on my phone. I didn't know what to say. It was like my mind had shut down. I wish I could say that was the first time I'd heard that, but it wasn't. I had an argument with my older sister, Emily, a couple of years ago, and she said the same thing. Everyone's scared to tell you, but you're hard to talk to. You make everything about you, and it's exhausting. At the time, I brushed it off. Emily and I have always butted heads, and I figured she was just being dramatic. But hearing it again from Sophie, it hit different. Like maybe there's some truth to it. Am I really that hard to talk to? Am I the problem in all of this? I spent the rest of the day replaying the argument in my head, picking apart every detail, every word, every tone of voice. I thought about all the times I tried to get input from my sisters on birthday plans or holiday gatherings and had been met with silence. I thought about how I've spent the last few years taking on the bulk of the emotional labor in our family, organizing, planning, making sure everyone's taken care of while they got to just show up and enjoy the results. And now I'm sitting here wondering if I'm the toxic one. Is it me? Am I the reason we can't have a normal conversation without it turning into a full-blown argument? My parents have said similar things to me in the past. When I was a kid, I was always the one who got in trouble for being too emotional or too intense. They'd tell me to calm down, that I was overreacting, that I was making things harder for everyone else. And now, as an adult, it feels like that same narrative is playing out with my sisters. I can't help but wonder if I've been conditioned to be this way, to expect the worst from people and lash out when I feel like I'm being attacked. I talked to my best friend, Jess, about it later that night. Jess is the kind of person who doesn't sugarcoat things, so I figured she'd give me an honest answer. So, am I actually hard to talk to? I asked, half joking, but also kind of terrified of what she might say. Jess paused for a second before replying. I mean, you can be intense sometimes, but I wouldn't say you're hard to talk to. You just have a lot of feelings, and that's not a bad thing. Then why do my sisters make me feel like I'm the problem? I asked, my voice catching in my throat. Jess sighed. It sounds like they've gotten used to you doing everything for them. Maybe they don't even realize how much you're carrying. And when you call them out on it, it makes them feel guilty, so they turn it around on you. I thought about that for a moment. Maybe she was right. Maybe my sisters were just deflecting their own guilt by making me out to be the bad guy. But that didn't make it hurt any less. I still felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders and no one else seemed to care.
I've been out of the house for 6 years now, but I feel like I've never truly left. Not really. My body might be in a different place, but my mind? It's still tethered to that house, that chaos, that mess of toxicity that's constantly pulling me back in, no matter how far I try to run. My grandma, my mom, and my sibling, they all live together, tangled up in a toxic web that I can't untangle, no matter how hard I try. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, knowing it's going to crash but being powerless to stop it. The worst part. I don't even know the full story. I only get bits and pieces, small glimpses of what's really going on in that house, and none of it is good. From what I can tell, my mom and sibling have taken the roles of financial and verbal abusers, and my grandma, at over 80 years old, is their victim. I can't even begin to describe the anger and helplessness I feel when I think about it. How they constantly shut her down, yell at her, snap at her, and then, after all that, still turn around and rely on her for money. It's like they've turned her into some kind of emotional punching bag and ATM all in one. My mom, she's got her health issues, and I try to be understanding about that. I really do. I know that her recent health problems make it hard for her to work, and I wouldn't begrudge her some help, especially from family. But here's the thing. It didn't just start when she got sick. This has been going on for nearly a decade. Before the health issues even popped up, she was relying on my grandma for money. My sibling. They just don't work. Haven't for years. So they both live in this house, fully dependent on my grandma, and they still have the audacity to get furious when she can't pay for something they want. It's mind-blowing. I mean, she's in her 80s, for Christ's sake. She should be the one being taken care of, not the other way around. And my mom's anger issues? Don't even get me started on that. She's always been that way, like a ticking time bomb, waiting for the slightest thing to set her off. 1 minute, everything's fine, and the next, she's screaming at the top of her lungs, and you're left standing there, wondering what the hell just happened. And the worst part? She never apologizes. Never. She'll scream, snap, throw her fit, and then act like nothing happened, like the whole thing was just a bad dream that we all imagined. But it wasn't a dream. It was real, and the tension from it lingers in the air, thick and suffocating. I think about my grandma a lot, and it breaks my heart. I know she's not perfect. None of us are. She's made her mistakes, and I know that her relationship with my mom is complicated. Messed up, even. There's so much history there, so much pain. I know my mom feels like my grandma emotionally neglected her throughout her childhood, and maybe she did. I wasn't there, so I can't say for sure. But that doesn't justify the way my mom treats her now. It doesn't give her the right to take out all that old pain on her, especially when she's the one relying on her to survive. It's like my mom never outgrew being that hurt, angry little girl, and now my grandma's paying the price for it. And worse, my mom has taught my sibling to do the same thing. Every time I visit, the tension in that house is palpable. You can feel it as soon as you walk through the door. The weight of all the unspoken resentment, the bitterness, the anger that's always simmering just beneath the surface. It's exhausting, just being there. Everyone's walking on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion, the next argument, the next passive-aggressive comment. And my grandma? She's stuck in the middle of it all, just trying to keep the peace, trying to survive in her own home, the home she worked her entire life to build. But it's not a home anymore. It's a battleground. I've tried to help, to defend my grandma when things get bad. But every time I speak up, I get the same response. You don't know what it's really like. You don't live here. And maybe they're right, to an extent. I don't live there anymore. I don't have to deal with the day-to-day insanity, the constant fights, the passive-aggressive comments, the yelling. But I lived there long enough to know the damage it does. I grew up in that house, in that mess. I know what it feels like to constantly be waiting for the other shoe to drop, to always be on edge, bracing yourself for the next outburst. So no, I don't live there now, but I know exactly what it's like. I'm at a complete loss for what to do. I feel this crushing sense of responsibility, like it's all on me to fix this, to protect my grandma from the people who are supposed to love and care for her. But how do you fix something that's been broken for decades? How do you protect someone from their own family? And more than that, how do you protect yourself when getting involved only seems to drag you down with them? There's no one else in the family to turn to. It's just me. My dad's been out of the picture for years. No aunts, uncles, or cousins to lean on. No one. It's like the whole family just dissolved into nothingness, leaving me as the last line of defense. It's all up to me, and I don't know if I can handle it. I've thought about cutting ties, just walking away from it all. I mean, what's the point of staying involved if all it does is cause me pain? Every time I visit, I leave feeling drained, angry, sad, like I've been sucked into a black hole of negativity that I can't escape. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. I spend days, sometimes weeks, trying to shake off the feeling that the house leaves me with. It's like a dark cloud that follows me around, even after I'm hundreds of miles away. And the worst part? I feel guilty for even thinking about walking away. How can I abandon my grandma like that? How can I just leave her to fend for herself in that house, with those people? I can't. I won't. So, I stay involved. I call her regularly, check in, make sure she's okay. Sometimes I visit, though those visits have become less frequent over the years. It's just too much to handle sometimes. But even when I'm not there, I can't stop thinking about it. About her, about what's happening in that house, about whether she's okay. And I wonder, how long can this go on? How long can she keep supporting them financially, emotionally, physically, before she breaks? Before her health, her sanity, gives out? She's already in her 80s. She should be enjoying her twilight years, relaxing, spending time with her grandkids, doing the things she loves. Instead, she's trapped in this nightmare, surrounded by people who only seem to take and take, never giving anything back. I've tried talking to my mom about it, tried to make her see what she's doing. But every time I bring it up, it's like talking to a brick wall. She either gets defensive, telling me I don't understand her struggles, or she lashes out, yelling, blaming everyone else for her problems, never taking responsibility. And my sibling? They're no better. They've been following in my mom's footsteps for years, learning the same toxic patterns, the same entitlement, the same anger. It's like history repeating itself, generation after generation, and I'm watching it unfold in real time, powerless to stop it. I've thought about moving my grandma in with me. It seems like the most logical solution, right? Get her out of that house, away from the toxicity, and into a safe, loving environment. But it's not that simple. For one, she's fiercely independent. She spent her entire life taking care of herself, and even now, she resists the idea of being taken care of by anyone else. She won't admit that she needs help, even though it's obvious to everyone around her that she does. And then there's the financial aspect. I'm doing okay for myself, but I'm not exactly rolling in money. Taking care of her full-time would be a huge financial burden, and I'm not sure I'm in a position to take that on. But even more than that, I'm scared. I'm scared of what it would mean to have her living with me, of how it would change my life, of whether I'm capable of being the caregiver she needs. I've spent so much of my life trying to escape that house, that family, and the thought of bringing any part of it into my space, into the life I've built for myself, is terrifying. I don't know if I can handle it, emotionally or mentally. I don't know if I'm strong enough to be the person she needs me to be. So, I'm stuck. Stuck between wanting to help, to protect her, and feeling completely overwhelmed by the responsibility that comes with that. Stuck between my loyalty to my family and my need to protect myself from their toxicity. Stuck between love and resentment, guilt and anger. I wish I had a solution. I wish I could say that I've figured it all out, that I know exactly what to do. But I don't. I'm just taking it one day at a time, trying to be there for my grandma as best I can while also trying to keep my own head above water. Some days, that's enough. Other days, it feels like I'm drowning. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know how long this situation will last, or how it will end. But I do know one thing. I'm not going to give up on my grandma. Not now, not ever. She's given too much, sacrificed too much, to be left alone in that house, at the mercy of people who only seem to want to take advantage of her. She deserves better than that. And as long as I'm still standing, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure she gets it.
I get it. When people talk about family, they're supposed to mean the ones who care for you, the ones who protect you, understand you, and have your back no matter what. But for me, it's the complete opposite. Honestly, I'm done with all this shit. I've got Asperger's and ADHD, so you can already guess that life isn't exactly easy for me. And my family, they make it 10 times worse. They're always off in their own heads, projecting their issues onto everyone around them, especially my parents, with all their unresolved childhood trauma. It's bad enough having your brain working against you most days, but try adding the chaos of a toxic family dynamic on top of that. I grew up in it, soaked in it, marinated in all their unresolved messes. Their problems became mine before I even understood what was happening. All those emotions, anger, guilt, shame, weren't just hovering over the house like a dark cloud. They soaked into me and my siblings. Right now, I'm in my final year of college, living away from home. Thank God. But whenever I go back, even just for a weekend, it feels like I'm stepping into a minefield. You'd think I'd feel some relief being in my own space most of the time, but the truth is, I'm scared of what happens after graduation. I'm stuck between this weird sense of dread and uncertainty. The idea of going back there permanently? Fuck that. But realistically, where else can I go? The house is never calm. Never. There's always something. Either some guilt-tripping bullshit from my mom, or my dad's moody emotional neglect. It's like they've got this unspoken agreement that peace is the enemy, and if there's even a moment of calm, they've got to mess it up with some kind of drama. They're both trapped in their own heads, still carrying baggage from their past, and instead of sorting it out, they dump it on us. Well, mostly on me. Maybe because I'm the weird one with the labels, the diagnoses that they don't really get. I've tried to explain it, how Asperger's and ADHD shape the way I see the world, how it's not something I can control, but they don't listen. They don't even try to understand. My mom always has this knack for making everything about her. She's a master at guilt tripping. I'll never forget the time I was having a full-blown sensory overload, practically losing it, and she stood there crying, telling me how much I hurt her by not being normal. As if I could just flip a switch and be the picture-perfect kid she wanted. My dad, he just shuts down. He's either checked out or angry, like I'm a problem he doesn't know how to solve. He didn't talk to me for 3 days once after I snapped at him for asking the same question over and over. 3 days. Like, giving me the silent treatment was somehow supposed to help. What makes it worse is that they're so wrapped up in their own crap, they don't even see what it's doing to my siblings. My brother started shutting down the same way my dad does. My other sister is constantly trying to make peace, keep things from falling apart, even though it's not her job to fix the family. She's just a kid, but she's carrying the weight of trying to hold us together. I do have one saving grace, though. My other sister, she's the only one who gets it. Like, really gets it. She's been through the same shit I have, dealt with the same parents, the same childhood that messed us both up. We talk sometimes, and it's the only time I feel like I'm not completely alone in all of this. We've got this silent understanding that no one else in the family seems to share. She's fed up with them too, and I think she's just waiting for a moment to leave and never look back, the same way I am. Sometimes I think back to when I was younger, and everything seemed not perfect, but manageable. Before I had a name for what was going on in my head, before Asperger's and ADHD became these huge labels that defined everything, I didn't always feel like I was broken. But the more I grew up, the more those differences became obvious. I didn't know how to act the way people expected. I didn't pick up on social cues, and I got frustrated when things didn't make sense. My parents saw that as me being difficult, like I was doing it on purpose. It was easier for them to blame me than to accept that maybe I needed help. Maybe I was just wired differently. Instead of trying to understand, they just started treating me like I was this constant problem. It's taken me years to realize that the problem was never me. It was them, their unresolved trauma, their inability to see past their own issues, their constant need to control everything. They've spent so long projecting their problems onto us that they've completely forgotten how to actually be parents. And the thing is, it's not just my home life that's messed me up. It's seeped into every part of my life. My friendships, my relationships, even the way I see myself. It's all been twisted by the shit I grew up with. I've got this constant feeling of not being good enough, of never being able to meet anyone's expectations. I can't even tell you how many times I've tried to make friends and completely messed it up because I didn't pick up on some social cue or said something that came out wrong. And when I do manage to connect with someone, I've got this nagging fear in the back of my mind that I'm going to screw it up, just like I always do. I've learned to live with it, though. I've developed a thick skin because of all of this. It's the only way I've survived, honestly. I've had to toughen up to keep myself from completely falling apart. But even that's not enough sometimes. There are days when I feel like I'm barely holding it together, like I'm one more argument, one more guilt trip away from completely losing it. I've thought about just disappearing more times than I can count, not in a suicidal way, but just vanishing, dropping off the map, cutting ties, and starting over somewhere new where no one knows me or my family or the weight of everything that comes with it. There's this fantasy I have sometimes where I pack up my stuff, move to some random city, and live in a tiny apartment where no one can reach me. No more family drama, no more guilt, no more feeling like I'm constantly walking on eggshells. But I know it's not that easy. Life doesn't work that way. I can't just run away from everything as much as I want to. I've got to face it, figure out how to move forward without letting all this shit drag me down. College has been my escape for the last few years. Living away from home has been a lifeline, a way for me to put some distance between myself and the chaos. But even that's temporary. Graduation is coming up, and I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff with no idea what comes next. I should be excited, right? This is supposed to be the start of my adult life, the moment where I start making my own choices and living for myself. But all I can think about is what happens if I can't find a job, if I can't support myself. Am I going to end up back in that toxic house, stuck in the same cycle I've spent years trying to escape? I keep telling myself that I'll figure it out. I have to, because going back to that house, that life, it's not an option. I can't do it. I can't live like that anymore, constantly tiptoeing around other people's issues, feeling like I'm always one wrong move away from another emotional blow-up. I deserve more than that. I deserve a chance to be happy, to be understood, to live a life where I'm not constantly being dragged down by other people's baggage. But for now, I'm stuck in this weird limbo, caught between the life I've always known and the one I want to create for myself. And as much as I hate to admit it, the thought of stepping into the unknown scares the hell out of me. It's funny, you spend your whole life trying to get away from the things that hurt you, only to realize that they've shaped you in ways you can't escape. I've got scars from all of this, scars that run deep, but they've also made me stronger. I've learned how to survive, how to navigate a world that doesn't always make sense to me, how to keep going even when everything feels like it's falling apart. So, yeah, maybe I'm fucked up. Maybe my family screwed me up in ways I'll be dealing with for the rest of my life. But I'm still here, and I'm still fighting. And as long as I can hold on to that, I think I'll be okay.